First of all, we all lost friends. Of my own family, my father was bayoneted by guerrillas.
It also came as a challenge to me that there I was supposed to love, absolutely, to love everybody, but I couldn't.
It's not something we want to go back on anymore.
I couldn't help resenting and disliking.
Sister Gertrude Motsika is a Roman Catholic nun, a native of Zimbabwe. She teaches high school in a rural mission there. Mr. Eddie Cross is also a native of Zimbabwe. He is head of the government's dairy marketing board. After a century of white domination and a decade of armed struggle, can blacks and whites build a new nation together? This is the challenge that faces the new Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is a land of contrasts. Most of its 7 million citizens are black, a few are white. Most have been very poor and a few very rich. It is a land of rural traditions and urban development, primitive agriculture and industrialized growth. The ancient and the modern. Zimbabwe perhaps typifies the contrasts that prevail in many new nations around the world. The traditions of old Zimbabwe go back at least 800 years to the thriving Shona kingdom of native Africans who controlled trade routes and built great stone cities. In 1888, Cecil Rhodes invaded the area in search of gold. He signed a treaty with the local ruler, Lobengula, that allowed him to seize virtual control of the region for England. 2 uprisings in the ensuing decade were put down with force, which consolidated white dominance. In 1923, the government redistributed the land, giving the best half to the few white settlers and the rest to the majority black population. While not as extreme as the apartheid of South Africa, government policies in Rhodesia were designed to maintain white supremacy through segregation.
For me, a black man was simply a shadow. In fact, it would be difficult for me even to recognize one black man from another in those days. In other words, they were not really people to me. And I guess that was part of growing up. I thought there was nothing abnormal about it. We very seldom met blacks at any level. We were not really aware of what our government at the time was doing to black family life, to the black people of the cities, to the deprivations that they were experiencing, in fact, for the reasons for the war.
Organized resistance to the white regime began as early as 1948. In 1965, while England was pressing its colony for better representation of the black population, Rhodesia, under its new Prime Minister, Ian Smith, declared unilateral independence. In reaction, the United Nations unanimously agreed to impose trade sanctions until majority rule should be established. Armed resistance began at about the same time. 2 major figures led the resistance: Joshua Nkomo, with strength in the Ndebele tribe, and Robert Mugabe, with strength in the majority Shona tribe. By the late 1960s, Rhodesia was in a state of war.
I believe that, no matter how serious things got, really violence was the last resort. And I think the majority of black Christians supported that point of view. But I also recognize that for the blacks, many years ago, the time for negotiation ran out, and they were just getting nowhere politically.
I was on the black side, to say the truth, because my little brother had joined in 1975. So each time the word terrorist was spoken, it hurt me very much, because my young brother was fighting. And I began to look at this fighting for the freedoms of Zimbabwe closely ever since my young brother joined.
Finally, in 1979, all parties accepted a British proposal called the Lancaster Accords, calling for a ceasefire and general elections that would guarantee majority rule. The winner was Robert Mugabe. Since he had been the most militant leader of the freedom fighters, and since he had spent 10 years in prison under Ian Smith, it was a welcome surprise when he declared a policy of reconciliation for his new government. Prime Minister Robert Mugabe.
We have to have peace. We have to have a common understanding amongst individuals and between communities. If we don't achieve this atmosphere of accommodation of one another, that we all belong to Zimbabwe, and that therefore we have a sense of common belonging. If we don't do that, then we achieve the opposite. And to get people involved, they must combine forces. And they cannot combine forces unless they are reconciled to each other, unless they are united, unless they love one another.
I'm very pleased that our Prime Minister, as soon as he came in, proclaimed we should all be reconciled. Let's forget the past and let's start anew. It always bothered me that I had that deep resentment and dislike and hatred. It almost get to hatred. I mean, if you have a bitter heart towards some people, it affects all your relationships with everybody else whom you love, and I felt it very strongly. So that made me look into my relationships with everybody, white or blacks. There I was at the university, I felt I wanted to love and to understand the problems of the others. So I began to look at the whites as individuals as well, people who had families, people who had aspirations and hopes, just like us. They had aspirations and hopes. And I looked at ourselves, we blacks, with our aspirations, hopes, and all our needs, which we wanted met and which we wanted to see really becoming reality. So in a way, whenever I heard so many whites were killed, in my raw state, I would say, yes, 2 down or 1 down. But I realized that wasn't. I didn't feel very happy about it.
The one thing you'll find that black and white Zimbabweans share, and that is an abhorrence of war. We're very, very tired of war at the end of 17 years of conflict. Very, very tired. That's the extraordinary thing about this country. And I'm sure you've picked it up, that despite the fact that we've been fighting each other, actually physically fighting each other, certainly pretty vigorously since 1972, and that we've been political antagonists, the white community and the black community here, virtually since 1949. Despite that, the race relations are phenomenally good. I
joined a group of some black and white Christians coming together to pray together, and it was so much from my heart that I meant well, and I wanted to be reconciled. And it took me a long time to learn really to work not out of resentment, but to really mean well. So with time, I should say I felt very happy too.
The effort at reconciliation extends into Sister Gertrude's work as a teacher. The gospel story of the Good Samaritan becomes the subject of a student drama.
There was once a man who was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when robbers attacked him, stripped him, and beat him up, leaving him half dead. It so happened that a priest was going down that road, but when he saw the man, he walked on by, on the other side. In the same way, a Levite also came along, went over and looked at the man, and then walked on by. on the other side. But a Samaritan who was traveling that way came upon the man, and when he saw him, his heart was filled with pity. He went over to him, poured him oil and wine on his wounds, and bandaged them. Then he took him to an inn, where he took care of him. And Jesus concluded, "In your opinion, which one of these three acted like a neighbor towards the man attacked by the robbers?" The teacher of the law answered, "The one who was kind to him." Jesus replied, "You go then and do the same."
But reconciliation also has a political context. The government attempts to avoid white flight and a consequent talent drain through its conciliatory policy. Zimbabwe's President Canaan Banana explains.
When we took over power in this country, we emerged from a situation of a bitter conflict, a conflict that had left our people divided, bitterly divided. So it was necessary to heal those wounds, and hence the policy of reconciliation went a long way in urging our people to bury the bitterness of the past with Rhodesia where it belonged and start on a new slate.
There's a large number of whites leaving the country, and white emigration is something that saddens me personally, because I think those people have a valuable role to play, and I think that Mugabe is genuine when he says to the whites of Zimbabwe, "We want you to stay." To the extent that Mugabe has really done an enormous amount since he came to power to put their fears at rest, and has behaved in a remarkably moderate fashion. He has not been the ogre that everybody thought that he was going to be. To that extent, their fears have been completely unwarranted. Standards here have not dropped. My children go to an ordinary government school. It's fully integrated now. Standards are extremely high. Discipline has been maintained. Academic standards are probably the highest in the African region, probably higher than in South Africa. I think the future very much depends on us as much as anybody else. In other words, if we stayed and we worked hard, the future depends on us as much as the government.
The challenge that faces the new government is not just its interrelationship with its white citizens. Centuries of tribal rivalry also demands attention. The new Zimbabwe faces a national challenge in education for all its people, providing new life skills to former freedom fighters and opening up opportunity at every level. In a word, the challenge is development, or in the words of Zimbabwe's leaders, self-sufficiency and self-reliance. Matawari is a village far from the urban advantages of skills training and health care. Self-sufficiency and self-reliance here require that new ways be found to meet people's needs. Aloysius Mutembana Sango crosses the river each day to work with the people of his church, where he is a catechist. What they have accomplished is something to sing about. When Aloysius and his neighbors get together, it is not just for good fellowship. Their solidarity represents hope and determination. They have established a training center that responds to all kinds of needs. It started with a credit union and now includes a health clinic plus courses in first aid, nutrition, reading, cooking, bricklaying, tinsmithing, carpentry, and tailoring. The success of their combined efforts constitute a new beginning for the whole community. Official government efforts to encourage self-sufficiency and self-reliance have resulted in model agricultural schools which integrate formal classroom experience with practical farm and construction experience. President Canaan Banana not only raised the funds to launch this school called Kushenga Pikalela, he also visits the school regularly to work alongside the students.
The establishment of Kushenga Pikalela arose out of the need for resettlement and reconstruction after the many years of a protracted war. We wanted to promote a spirit of self-reliance and cooperation leading to self-sufficiency, to reconcile ourselves to the soil in particular, because agriculture, in our view, forms a very important part of our development and our national survival. We believe that this institute can only survive through a spirit of perseverance, dedication, devotion, and hard work. It was, in fact, this same spirit of perseverance that saw us through this protracted struggle for liberation and independence.
Another dramatic example of the way Zimbabwe is being transformed is a school called Rusenanguko. This school embraces some 1,200 students, most of whom were refugees during the struggle for majority rule. Sister Janice McLaughlin is an American Mary Noel nun who works as an aide to President Banana on educational projects. She has been personally involved in the establishment of Rusenanguko.
Well, all of the projects I'm involved in, to me, are ways of building a new Zimbabwe. The purpose of Rusenanguko and the other 7 pilot schools for former refugee children is to provide a model for a new education system, a system that will be more related to the needs of the people. We talk about decolonizing the mind, that people through the colonial system were totally colonized to look down on rural people, to look down on manual labor, to despise working with their hands and getting dirty. And now we want to destroy that colonial mentality. Practically, it's done by, first of all, putting the schools in the rural areas on farms so that agriculture is an integral part of the school. It's done by having technical subjects in all of the schools so that you don't merely learn academic subjects. And it's done by changing the curriculum so that your new textbooks integrate your practical and your theoretical. The children themselves build their own schools. While they learn building, they're actually building their classrooms, their dormitories. In the meantime, they live in tents or grass houses that they make. The farms are all big enough that if they're utilized properly, we can feed the whole school, plus sell the surplus and make profit for the school. The schools are meant to be self-reliant, not only in producing food, but that the profits will be reinvested in the school. We're running the farms as cooperatives, so the children and the teachers learn cooperative management, cooperative structures right there while they're in school. Which is why I think these children at Rusenanguko are, despite their difficult material conditions, they're so happy, their morale is so good, because they know hardship, they're willing to sacrifice for something they believe in. And so this is, to me, also part of the mandate of the gospel, to make all things new, to create a new heaven and a new earth.
The church, I see it as having to play a very big role in this development. We are no longer being We are no longer being prevented by anything like any system which is oppressive or any system where we stand at a disadvantage when we are saving blacks. So we should be involved in a big way in development, in education, in health. The government is reaching out to everybody. So it's big programs for development and also opening up schools and making primary education free, secondary education free, and providing health and everything that is necessary to life free for everybody.
The church and state have in fact a great deal in common. I think we both are concerned about satisfying the legitimate aspirations of our people, all our people. And we are concerned about improving the quality of life of all our people. And I believe those objectives we share in common with the churches. But before we can realize this noble ideal of united effort between state and church, I think there are certain basic fundamental principles and changes that have got to take place in the church. First, I believe the church has got to experience a complete transformation of its theological outlook. That is, it has got to define theology within the context of the human situation in which our people find themselves. The church has got to try and come to terms with the political, social, and economic dynamics pertaining in this country.
Because I believe our government is trying to put across or to live an ideology of socialism which is suitable to the Zimbabweans. So for socialism to be successful, there has to be the man who is molded, a man who is honest, a man who is considerate, a man who is loving, selflessly loving his fellow men. Then only will socialism succeed.
Prime Minister Mugabe.
But I believe that it's necessary to try and bring home to those who oppose socialism that it is based on the same principles as Christianity. When I saw the Holy Father on my visit to Italy, and he had occasion to refer to socialism here, he said he was very happy that this was the course we were going. The church also was based on socialism. Socialism, he said, was a philosophy of human solidarity. I think that's the words he used, human solidarity, and this is it. And human solidarity based on love, based on justice.
So I'm not frightened at all about the fact that our government is setting up a society where the ideology that they pursue is socialism. In fact, I think it came late. So long as this socialism is related to us as Zimbabweans, its moral background is based on, me as an African and my traditional background, and strongly so on the Christian way of living. So that's why I see we as a church taking a big part, that is giving the spiritual growth to the men who are involved in bringing about the ideology of socialism in the country, as well as building all our people in the rural areas, that is giving them the true freedom of the heart, which can only come from Christ. No other ideology can succeed in planting true life and true freedom in the heart of man. So Zimbabwe will set a pattern for the whole of Africa, and not only Africa, because I think Europe needs us very much, and America too. You people have everything that you need. Your countries are well developed. But perhaps you face more problems than we by way of the human heart, if I'm not mistaken.
The future of Zimbabwe is important not only to the people, black and white, who live in Zimbabwe, but also to many other nations and leaders. What does its success or failure bode for others?
If we can do it, any country in Africa can do it. It's a symbol of hope for Africa. There's no doubt about that. We are the pivot around which the whole region circulates. If we succeed in our experiment here in Zimbabwe, the experiment of building a non-racial society as an alternative, a non-racial society based on democratic principles, respect for the dignity of man, a mixed economic system, if we can establish that kind of society here successfully and make it work visibly, it will be a demonstration to white South Africans that there is an alternative to apartheid. If, on the other hand, Zimbabwe fails, for one reason or another, the demonstration effects for South Africa will be equally great in the opposite direction. If Zimbabwe fails, I don't think there's much hope for South Africa. I really don't.
I believe there are certain important lessons that the Zimbabwean struggle can teach to the rest of Southern Africa, perhaps to the rest of Africa and the world. And one of these lessons is that no amount of coercive force by a minority group can hold the people to ransom forever.